Last time on Let's Stitch, how to make the base body so that, you could get a nice framework to make your own player character. And then we stuff our little patata, little petite. There you go, bang bang. But, some people are a little different. Some people had appendicitis. Nice gorilla lips. Welcome back, gang. In the last video, I broke down an easy way to make versatile bodies for your Animal Crossing player character. And with that out of the way, we can focus on the exciting part and throw a mug on this rug. This love bug. This... I don't have anything else, so let's get back into it. To begin, let's place the eyes. Now, most eyes for humans in Animal Crossing have a white eyeball. These eyes in particular are a nice little egg shape, and we're going to ladder stitch those onto the face. Each eye is actually two pieces of white t-shirt sewn together, then flipped so that the seam is on the inside. Another nice shape you could try is this teardrop design. You'll probably notice that these eyes are a little jagged around the edge, and that's okay. We're going to even that out in just a little bit. There are a few Animal Crossing eyes which have no eyeball whatsoever, and so for this example we can just sew the buttons straight on to the face. Trigger warning if you happen to be a small girl named Coraline. Here's a little technique for you, huh? So coming from underneath the button, you loop over from one hole to the other. Then once you pull that nice and tight, you can run the needle through the face back up to your first hole. So there's no need to go through the buttonhole and the fabric at the same time. You can do the button first, then the fabric, and vice versa. When knotting a button off, I like to loop around perpendicular to my stitch, but I don't know if that really does anything special. Now these eyes have some lazy eyelids on top, but they're kind of like rosy. I think that for the skin tone we're rocking on this one, a smoky ruddy brown works well. What I'm using here is the hem of a t-shirt that I've had for maybe 5 years because I'm just a pitiful goblin who saves everything they can until they're buried by garbage. But finding a use for even a tiny bit of it completely vindicates my unhealthy habit of never letting anything go. Be less like me, please. Anyway, we can use the ladder stitch to secure these right over the eyes. That clean edge of the hem serves as the edge of the eyelid. Isn't that satisfying? If not, a little reminiscent of Garfield? Let's just call it satisfying, because that's a trendy word, and we can move on to the nose. To build up the nose, I want a soft orange embroidery floss. Embroidery floss is pretty common on dolls, and something that I'm not very good with, honestly. But if I can manage this tiny bit of embroidery, you shouldn't have much of an issue. Just line your stitches up closely and evenly, take it slow, and keep your threads at the same length. Now, a little problem you can run into with your floss is that if you pull from the loop in the wrong way, you quickly end up with a tangled mess that will unravel your brain while you spend an hour trying to unravel it. So, my best advice is just to not do that. This brown floss is for the mouth. I've got it mapped out with these pins just to visualize how I want my stitches to travel. There's a pretty little embroidery stitch that creates a nice decorative look called the chain stitch. Take a peek here. We create a loop by running the thread right over the top of itself, you see, and then come out a bit ahead of your stitch. Then take your needle and run it through the loop you created. Now, after you pull it tight, dip the needle right through the loop again and move your stitch forward. Once more, bring your needle through the new loop you made, and so on, so forth. This is literally chaining your stitches together. Oh my god, that's why it's called the chain! A detail to consider is that the shape is going to be somewhat pointed towards the direction you're moving. This will show up a little later, and I'll explain how to overcome that. You can see I'm anchoring lots of thread at the top of the head, and you can probably guess that we'll be covering that with hair later. If you got a bald animal crosser, then I would just anchor at the bottom of the head instead. We'll use the same stitch to embroider a pair of eyelashes, or I guess that was my plan. It worked fine for the curl of the eyelash, but when I tried going over the eyelid, I just ended up with an abomination. So I just decided to rip all of that out. And we're gonna fix the eyelids down with just a little bit of Fabrifuse. It's a little stuck. Alright, so we had a little clog in the nozzle there, but it's okay. We cleaned everything up, and no one freaked out. As I was saying, a little bit of Fabrifuse will glue down the eyelids, and we'll actually just run some embroidery floss over the top, and we'll glue that too. There we go. That's one face down. So let's try another. So to keep a symmetrical look, we'll just start our stitch in the middle and create one half of our shape. Then we'll tie that off and come back to the middle again, through the previous stitch, and create the other half of the shape. Voilà amici mama! Okay, so that classic Animal Crossing triangle nose we can make using the chain stitch as well. We're basically just using one central point at the top and fanning out towards the bottom. The outline for the eyes looks pretty nice with the chain stitch. And we can give them eyelashes at the same time, so check this. When we get to the spot around the side where the first lash would be, we just break out a 90-degree angle here, and we make one stitch pointed outward. To get back to the eye, we just need to stitch over the top of our loop to hold it down, and come right back to where we left off. Then continue around the eye. If we keep our stitches relatively even, we can just remember that it's one stitch out, one stitch across, and one stitch out again. When that's done, we should have one fine pair of Betty Boops. Y'all remember that classic bop? Boop boop be-doop, whatever. We haven't talked hair yet, and gosh dang it, that's about to change today, so okay. I love t-shirt hair as a medium, but I just could not find the right shade of brown that I wanted to complement our skin tones. So, I'm going to take an unnecessary detour to discuss how you can dye your own fabric, even without a washer and dryer. We got ourselves a cheap little hot plate here, set that to medium. We want the dye to be hot, just shy of boiling. And we also have a cheap stock pot. Then we're using some liquid RIT dye. Gang, do not use a pot you intend to cook food in later, okay? That's a no-no, alright? You turn around and make some ragu in this pot afterward, you're gonna have to call poison control, you feel me? Anyway, pour on some water. You'll need enough to keep the fabric submerged and with freedom to move around in there, okie doke? We'll let that heat up for a few minutes. You know, this water doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot, but I've got a lid, so let's slap that on and we'll get a hot water, no problema. Alright, so the first thing you actually want to do is plug in the hot plate, then let your water heat up. Now the instructions recommend adding a bit of dish soap to help the dye penetrate the fibers. I don't know enough about dye to argue against that, so we're going to add that in. And we're going to drop in 2 caps of dye to start. We can always add more to deepen the color. And drop our fabric in there, get the soup going. After about half an hour, we can take it off the heat, run our fabric through some warm water, then some cold water, until the fabric runs clear. And then, we could let it air dry, but if you have a hairdryer on hand, we'll set that baby to full blast and dry the fabric out in just a few minutes. Depending on the size of your fabric, obviously. You know, if you're doing several yards at a time, a hairdryer could take more time than you're willing to commit. Keep in mind, the fabric will look darker when it's wet, so be prepared for it to get a shade lighter when it's dry. So, in the end, I think dyeing my own color was totally worth the effort. It's just a richer brown. So let's jump back to the task we set out to do and try a few hairstyles. This one is fairly simple. We'll take a bit of our t-shirt and drape it over the front of the head, and use that ladder stitch to hold it down. Now we're going to work from both sides, meeting in the center of the back of the head, because we're fitting a straight piece to a round surface, and some excess fabric is inevitable. We want to make sure that excess meets in a symmetrical way. And this hole also lets us stuff the hair a little bit fuller. That excess bit of fabric can either be trimmed off or just be tucked inside, but either way, we'll close it up with a ladder stitch. There are a few dangly pieces to sew up, 2 of them being these side bangs that are a wispy little smoky shape. And the third one is a claw-like shape for the ponytail. After sewing all of these up, we'll stuff them and attach them. And that's one way to make an Animal Crossing hairstyle. Now you may be wondering where this little dress came from. Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's gonna be a third video about clothes or something. I don't know, it's really weird. But let's try another hairstyle. This one is just a little more complicated, so we'll start by folding some fabric into a rectangle, and we'll pin it to the head. Again, we're gonna have some excess, so let's turn them into a pair of darts over top. That looks pretty dope, honestly. But we'll trim that excess off. And when we unfold it, we're left with a W shape. Stitch that up and stuff it, then use the ladder stitch to join it back together. That should wrap over the head pretty decently. And a smaller rectangle will make us a nice set of straight bangs. All we have to do is ladder stitch that on and bing, bang, bizzity, bap, that's another hairstyle. Is this easy, or do you hate it? I can't hear you either way, so let's try one more hairstyle. This one is a little wild. Look at this mischievous child. So for the long, wavy look, we'll start with the side-parted bangs. Ignore that one of those bangs looks kind of like a moon. Ideally, you want one small American football and one large American football. ladder stitch those on, and then we'll make one large rounded rectangle along with two, I guess they're like crab claws or like a salmon head. Am I getting too esoteric? Should I shut up? Stuff those pieces, not super full. We want a good amount of squish. Squish. And this is how I managed to achieve a wavy look. If we run some thread from the back to the front of the hair pieces, the tension will cause the fabric to be pulled together. So near the bottom, we'll run thread along the width of the piece. Once that's done, we'll go around back and use the ladder stitch to pull the inside together, effectively gathering the bottom of the hair up into itself and creating a little curviness. The side pieces will get the same treatment. We want to curl up their tapered ends, kind of like when you're walking around, and you're like, oh, hey, someone left this Let's Stitch YouTube channel on the ground. Better bend down and subscribe to that real quick. Now we can ladder stitch all of that together, starting with the big rectangle and adding in the two side pieces. I've used the phrase side piece twice in the last minute, and I don't like that. Then again, I don't know what else to call them. They know what they are. I want to jump back and say I wasn't happy with the length of the hair in the last hairstyle, so I cut a new rectangle piece and I fit it over the bottom of the hair to stretch it out. But you can avoid that by making it the right length the first time around. And that's the moral of this video. Do everything right the first time, and you won't ever have any problems. But the second moral is that even if you get it wrong at first, you can always try again. I hope this demonstration was helpful for you. There are a lot of possibilities in making hairstyles and facial features for your animal crosser, and even more options for clothes. So, in the next video, I'll touch on a few examples of dressing your character. And that'll do it for me in this one. Thank you so much for watching. Keep making stuff, and I'll see you next time.